Why would I want my wife to have my last name?
Stop.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you, Parks.
No, what's the reason? You can't just say you agree.
The married
I can say that.
Well, y'all following the.
You following that shit to the T, nigga.
I don't know what they
My
doing.
wife better call me.
They married and I'm not, so I'm sure no.
My wife better call me, nigga.
The two married people have a different
I
taste.
said
I'm shooting at him. I don't want to track nobody. For me, it's always about the why of it. If you're doing it for safety, that's one thing. If you're doing it like, I need to know, I need to make sure you are where you say you are. Like I'm checking.
No.
And a lot of people pretend they're doing it for safety, but they really are doing it to.
Marc Lamont Hill just put Queen's Flip and Ice under the microscope. And trust me, you won't believe how personal this got. During a recent episode of the Joe Budden Podcast, Marc once again fired shots at his fellow castmates, peeling back the layers of who they really are when it comes to their relationships behind closed doors. Now, for anyone who might be out of the loop, Marc Lamont Hill openly lives a non-traditional lifestyle with his wife, and he's never been shy about that. He laid all of this out on his own show, In This Thing Together, making sure the audience caught every detail. And here's the part that had people talking. He straight up revealed that he has no intention of requiring his wife to take his last name, flipping traditional expectations on their head.
Emails in the first 2 weeks of the show asking why we don't have the same last name.
I think people also don't realize that much of the world does not change their name. We also have to think about the history of why people change their names, because you had dominion over me, the children, the house, like we were all part of your property essentially.
And that single revelation lit the Joe Budden Podcast on fire, and had every co-host reacting instantly. See, the Joe Budden Podcast mostly operates from what people would call very traditional American values. You know how it goes. People usually take their partner's last name. People still openly talk about hitting strip clubs multiple times even while they're in relationships. Just classic, old school thinking across the board over there. So everyone was basically like, hold up, you're Marc Lamont Hill and you're not even pushing your wife to take your last name? From there, the conversation went way deeper than anyone expected. I'm talking heated energy, raised voices, and this all happening around hour 3 of the podcast. That alone tells you how massive this topic was, because it turned into a full-blown moment, and honestly woke up a cast that seemed worn out. As things kept rolling, the debate shifted into traditional versus non-traditional approaches to marriage. I'll be fair, Ish made some solid points. And I'll also say Marc made some strong arguments. But what really slipped under the radar was Marc Lamont Hill quietly taking shots at Queen's Flip. Now, that matters to me in this channel because Marc Lamont Hill and Queen's Flip have never really been on the same wavelength. Ever since they started working together, you can feel that Marc represents a new direction of the show that Flip doesn't fully vibe with. That direction favors Marc's contributions more than Flip's, even though Flip believes he changed the Joe Budden Podcast forever. And honestly, in some ways, he's not wrong. He was the one who introduced live streaming. On top of that, he helped make the show hot again when it was slipping due to Ice and Ish becoming predictable. But Flip's control issues, especially during Season 2 of Improper Improv, exposed the ceiling on how far he could really go because he wouldn't accept coaching from Ian or Joe Budden. Meanwhile, when Marc Lamont Hill came in, he showed a clear willingness to take guidance from Ian, doing things like the Ian and Marc show and leaning into feedback. Marc Lamont Hill basically said yes to everything the network needed. So then the question becomes, was he doing it strictly for the bag, or was he genuinely invested? In my opinion, it was probably a little bit of both. Either way, that's when Marc Lamont Hill casually dropped the line, "You're not really married." And the way he said it came completely out of nowhere. He followed it up like, "Everyone here who agrees with me is actually married." And he was clearly talking about Parks and himself. So Parks jumped in and basically said it wasn't that serious to him whether Rem, or however you say her name, took his last name, and if I remember right, I think she actually did. Either way, he made it clear that it wasn't a deal breaker for him at all. And this part matters because everyone knows Flip does not play about his family. Marc Lamont Hill essentially pulled the curtain back by implying that Flip might not be legally married in the eyes of the law. That idea isn't new either. It's been hinted at plenty of times on the podcast. They joke about it. They dance around it. And honestly, it's more common than people admit. A lot of folks move like they're married, feel married emotionally, live married lives, but stop short of legally locking it in. And most of the time, that hesitation comes from fear of divorce and splitting everything down the middle. So in a way, Marc was low-key exposing that reality. But that wasn't even the only moment that raised eyebrows. Marc Lamont Hill also went into a conversation about tracking your partner through apps. Whether it's Life 360, Safety Lock, or one of those Apple location apps. And according to Marc, that kind of behavior can come from insecurity. Now, I don't think he was outright firing shots in that moment. But I do think Marc sees Ice as insecure based on how he tracks missing piece, his significant other, and yes, the unofficial third rail of the Joe Budden podcast. For anyone who missed it, Ice admitted on an episode of Pod Wives that he was tracking her location. He noticed she was at the club. She stayed out late. And on top of that, she wasn't answering his calls. That topic alone is super divisive. Some people feel you should be able to track your partner freely. Personally, I think there's a difference between tracking a wife and tracking a girlfriend, but that's just me. Y'all can argue that one out in the comments. Either way, I'm pretty sure this lines up exactly with how Marc views Ice. To him, Ice represents insecurity turned all the way up. And I don't think Marc is alone in that opinion. It feels like the rest of the cast sees it too. And honestly, a big chunk of the audience agrees. It's fascinating to watch. Because I genuinely think this could come to a boiling point. Ice does not like those kinds of jokes. He doesn't even like subtle hints. Even on today's episode, he mentioned how people take shots at him but hide behind the excuse that it's just jokes. But in his mind, those jokes are really jabs. In that moment, he was specifically talking about Queen's flip. And I found that interesting. Ice said he doesn't talk about people who aren't present. And the only person missing from that episode was Queen's flip. Now, I don't know if Ice meant that directly. Or if Flip is being nudged by certain people, like Joe Budden, to poke at Ice more because everyone knows that's how you get a reaction out of him. And there's another layer to all of this that deserves attention. Some people argue that Marc Lamont Hill has actually messed up the show, even while making it better. What they mean is this faction of the audience believes Marc makes people uncomfortable being their true selves. So uncomfortable that they feel forced to lie or soften things just to avoid looking dumb, embarrassed, or insecure around him. And honestly, that argument isn't completely baseless. When Marc Lamont Hill really gets in his bag, nobody even wants to challenge him. Because you already know he's going to come back at you. And he'll do it within the unwritten hierarchy of the Joe Budden podcast. He'll joke with you by you, I mean Ice or Imani, at a full 100. But he won't joke on Joe at that same level. Marc understands the office politics. He knows how to move. So it's delicate. But it's also noticeable. And sometimes it's obvious to me how Marc plays both sides of that dynamic. Alright y'all, let me know how you see it. I felt like this was worth pointing out because Marc and Flip are clearly not cool. They've stayed cordial at best. And since Marc Lamont Hill joined the show, Flip has slowly been pushed to the margins. Some of that is self-inflicted. His need for control. His habit of getting in his own way. Tripping over himself when all he had to do was relax. Now he feels neutered on the podcast and can't fully be himself. That's why I always pay close attention to moments between Marc and Flip. Because to me, those exchanges are really about Joe Budden, Ian, and Flip. It's a corporate culture clash playing out in real time. And remember, Ian said something interesting. Joe said something interesting too, on Shannon Sharp and on EYL. They both compared what they want the show to become to SNL, where people eventually rotate out and leave.
The Office meets SNL.
That's good. That's a good one.
We're a platform. Like, we hope you use us and then go off and do your own thing.
But we do want people to leave. Like, I think that's a misconception. If that's what they think, we definitely want people to leave.
That's fascinating to me because
that part really jumps out to me because it doesn't feel like anyone actually wants to walk away. I honestly think that consistent paycheck plays a huge role. So when they talk about people who should leave, the real question becomes, who are they even talking about? Is it Flip? Because if we're being real, Flip is usually the first name that comes up when that conversation happens. Or is it Ice, maybe because he always seems annoyed or wears that sour expression? Could Ice be the one they're hinting at? Either way, nobody seems eager to exit. They like the money. They also like being on the Joe Budden podcast and using that spotlight to springboard into other opportunities. And the wild part is, the show has already proven it can plug in almost anyone, literally anyone, and the audience will still tune in.